The last resort. The grand chamber of the Galactic Conclave had never been so silent. 500 representatives from across the known universe sat motionless, their collective breath held as they watched the holographic display at the center of the room. Another system gone dark. Another billion lives extinguished. First emissary Talon Kreth, whose crystalline exoskeleton glimmered under the chamber's dim lights, stood at the podium, his forearms gripping the edges as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. The Arthoid diplomat had aged visibly in the past cycle, the vibrant blues of his carapace fading to a dull gray. The Helios system has fallen, Greth announced, his voice wavering. The void swarm consumed it in less than 10 standard hours. No survivors reported. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Helios system had been one of their strongest military outposts, home to the Conclave's Third Fleet and protected by defense systems developed over millennia. That marks 27 systems in 60 days, continued Kareth. Our analysts project that at current expansion rates, the swarm will reach the core worlds within 2 months. Grand Minister Vela Solmane, the ancient Lumari whose luminescent tendrils had dimmed with age and worry, floated forward. What of the barricade protocol? Surely the quantum barriers. Failed. Kareth interrupted. The swarm adapted. They always adapt. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Species that had been bitter enemies for generations now united in their fear. The Void Swarm had appeared 6 months ago at the galaxy's edge, a collective consciousness of nanomachines that consumed everything in its path, growing stronger with every world it devoured. Nothing had stopped it, not diplomacy, not weapons, not even the sacrifice of entire star systems. Silence. The voice that cut through the chaos came from Drav Moro, the sentinel of the Conclave's military forces. The reptilian commander's scales bristled as he stepped to the center of the chamber. We have tried everything within our known science. We have deployed every weapon in our arsenal. We have lost. The admission sent a chill through the assembly. Moro had never admitted defeat, not even during the machine wars a century earlier. There is one option we have not considered, came a quiet voice from the shadows. All eyes turned to Elder Ziva, the last of the Primori, whose species predated the Conclave itself. She rarely spoke at gatherings, and when she did, all listened. No, hissed Kreth immediately. We swore never to contact them again. Ziva's ancient eyes, milky with age, but still sharp with intelligence, fixed on the first emissary. Would you rather watch our civilization burn? Would you condemn trillions to death because of ancient pride? Who? Asked a younger representative, a Solari whose light-based form flickered with confusion. Who could possibly help us now? The chamber grew deathly quiet as Ziva uttered a single word. Humans. The reaction was immediate. Half the chamber rose in outrage, while others fell into stunned silence. Humans, the species that had been excluded from the Conclave 8 centuries ago after the Terran conflicts. The species whose unpredictability and capacity for violence had terrified the orderly species of the Conclave. They were banished for a reason, Moro growled. They are dangerous. Yes, Ziva agreed, her voice calm. And that is precisely why we need them now. Grand Minister Solmane's tendrils pulsed thoughtfully. Do we even know if they still exist? After what we did to them. They exist, Ziva said with certainty. I have maintained unofficial contact with certain human factions. This revelation caused another uproar. Kareth slammed all 4 arms on the podium. You violated the severance edict. I acted to preserve historical knowledge, Ziva replied without apology. And now that knowledge may save us all. After hours of heated debate, the decision was made. Not unanimously, not happily, but desperately. The Conclave would reach out to humanity, the species they had feared, banished, and tried to forget. Using ancient communication protocols that hadn't been activated in centuries, they sent their distress call into the darkness of uncharted space, where humans had retreated after their expulsion. For 3 days, there was no response. Hope began to fade. Then, on the 4th day, as the conclave leaders gathered once more, their communication array activated. The holographic display flickered, and a figure appeared, humanoid, dressed in a sleek uniform that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The human's face was partially obscured by a neural interface that wrapped around their left eye and temple. "This is Admiral Cassandra Way of the Terran Confederation," the human said, her voice cool and measured. "We received your distress call. Explain yourselves." Krith stepped forward, swallowing his pride. "Admiral Way, I am First Emissary Talon Krith of the Galactic Conclave. We face an unprecedented threat that we cannot defeat alone. We request humanity's assistance." The human's expression didn't change. The same conclave that declared us too dangerous to exist among civilized species. The same conclave that gave us the choice between exile or extermination. "Yes," Kreth admitted, his exoskeleton clicking as he shifted uncomfortably. "Times have changed. Circumstances have changed." "No," Wei replied coldly. "You've simply found something that frightens you more than we do." Elder Ziva moved forward, her ancient form barely able to support itself. "Admiral Wei, I am Elder Ziva of the Primori. Some of us maintained faith in humanity. Some of us opposed the severance." Wei's expression softened slightly at the sight of Ziva. "Elder, your transmissions have been received over the centuries. You were always fair to us." Then, in the name of that fairness, Ziva pleaded, "Hear us now. The threat we face will consume everything, even your confederation, eventually. It is called the Void Swarm, and it devours all in its path." Wei was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "Send us everything you have on this swarm. All sensor data, all battle records, all attempts at communication or neutralization. Everything." "Of course," Greth agreed quickly. "And in return." "In return." Wei's laugh was sharp. "You misunderstand, emissary. This isn't a negotiation. We'll analyze your data and decide if this threat warrants our involvement. If it doesn't, you're on your own. If it does," she paused. "If it does, we will help on our terms, not yours." "What terms?" Morrow demanded, stepping forward. Wei's gaze hardened. "Full reinstatement of humanity in galactic affairs, complete access to conclave technology and star charts, and a formal acknowledgement of the injustice done to us 8 centuries ago." The chamber erupted again, but Kreth raised his arms for silence. "We will consider your terms," he said carefully. "Do so quickly," Wei replied. "Based on the fragmentary data we've already intercepted, your void swarm is accelerating its consumption patterns. You have days, not weeks." The transmission ended, leaving the conclave in tense silence. "We cannot agree to those terms," Morrow said immediately. "Give humans full access to conclave resources. They would dominate us within a generation." "We may not have a generation," Solmane countered, her tendrils flickering rapidly. "We may not have a year." Kreeth looked around the chamber, at the representatives of species that had built the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. A civilization now on the brink of extinction. "Send them everything," he ordered. "Every scrap of data, every failed strategy, every lost battle. And may whatever gods you believe in have mercy on us all." Within hours, the data transfer was complete. The conclave waited, each moment punctuated by reports of the swarm's advancement. Another system gone. Another billion lives lost. 3 days later, as the conclave leaders gathered to discuss evacuation plans for the core worlds, the communication array activated once more. Admiral Wei appeared again, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood other humans, military officers, scientists, and figures whose purpose wasn't immediately clear. "We've analyzed your data," Wei said without preamble. "The Void Swarm represents an existential threat to all sentient life, including humanity. We will intervene." The relief in the chamber was palpable, but short-lived. Our terms stand, Wei continued. Do you accept? Grith looked to his fellow leaders. Solmin nodded slowly. Moro, after a long moment, gave a reluctant nod as well. We accept, Greth said. Good. Wei's expression remained serious. Prepare your remaining military forces to receive coordination data. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet will arrive at these coordinates in 36 hours. One of the Conclave's tactical officers gasped. That's impossible. Even with the most advanced drive systems, no fleet could reach those coordinates from uncharted space in such a short time. A small, cold smile appeared on Wei's face. 800 years is a long time, emissary. You might be surprised by what humanity has achieved in our isolation. The transmission ended, leaving the Conclave leaders to wonder if they had just saved their civilization, or handed it to an enemy they had once feared enough to banish from the galaxy. Titans unleashed. 36 hours later, exactly as promised, the sensors at the rendezvous point detected spatial distortions. The remaining Conclave defense fleet, 300 ships representing the last major military force of their civilization, waited in formation. First emissary, Greth stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Eternal Vigilance, his exoskeleton tight with tension. Beside him, Elder Ziva watched the spatial readings with quiet anticipation. They're coming, she said simply. The distortions grew, not like the rippling effect of conventional faster-than-light travel, but like tears in the fabric of space itself. Through these tears emerged ships, human ships, unlike anything the Conclave had ever seen. They were massive, dark vessels with sleek, predatory lines. They didn't reflect light so much as bend it around their hulls, giving them a ghostly, shadowy appearance. There were no visible weapon ports, no engine exhausts, nothing that conformed to Conclave shipbuilding principles. By the first light, whispered Commander Moro, who had insisted on being present. How many are there? I count 7 vessels, reported the sensor officer, her voice wavering. 7. Moro barked a laugh. 7 ships against the Void Swarm. We sent 3,000 against their first incursion, and were decimated. The communication array activated, and Admiral Wei appeared. She was now dressed in full battle armor, the neural interface around her eye glowing with data streams. Conclave flagship, this is Admiral Wei. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet has arrived. Greth stepped forward. Admiral, we appreciate your prompt arrival. But 7 ships. The swarm has consumed entire armadas. Wei's expression remained impassive. These are not ships as you understand them, emissary. Each vessel is a Titan-class war platform, a self-contained battle ecosystem with capabilities your science cannot yet comprehend. 7 is more than sufficient. Before Kareth could respond, the tactical officer called out, Void Swarm detected. Multiple approach vectors. They'd found us. On the main display, a visualization of space around them darkened as countless small objects, each the size of a grain of sand, but networked into a deadly collective, swarmed toward them. All Conclave vessels, maintain your position. Wei ordered, her voice cutting through the panic. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. They'll overwhelm us if we just sit here. Moro protested. We ignored him. Titans, deploy Phase 1 countermeasures. Operation Firebreak commencing. The 7 human vessels moved with impossible grace, arranging themselves in a formation that made no tactical sense to Conclave military doctrine. No defensive screen, no overlapping fields of fire, just a seemingly random pattern. Then, simultaneously, all 7 ships emitted a pulse, not energy as the Conclave understood it, but something that distorted space itself in expanding rings. When these pulses reached the approaching swarm, something remarkable happened. The swarm, which had always moved with perfect coordination, began to fragment. Sections broke away, moving erratically, some even turning against other parts of the collective. What are you doing to them? Kareth asked, astonished. Quantum entanglement disruption, Wei explained. The swarm operates as a unified consciousness through quantum links. We're severing those links, forcing individualization. Impossible, one of the conclave scientists muttered. We tried quantum disruption fields. They adapted within minutes. Your disruption fields operated on principles the swarm could understand and counter, Wei replied. Ours operate on principles your science hasn't discovered yet. The fragmented swarm attempted to regroup, sections flowing back together like mercury, but the human ships fired again. This time, narrow beams of intensely focused energy that didn't destroy the swarm particles but seemed to reprogram them. Phase 2 active, Wei reported. Nanite override protocols engage. On the tactical display, portions of the swarm were now changing color from black to blue, indicating they were no longer part of the hostile collective. You're converting them? Elder Ziva asked, her ancient eyes wide with wonder. The swarm is ultimately a tool, a weapon created for a purpose, Wei explained. We're giving it a new purpose. For the next 2 hours, the assembled conclave fleet watched in stunned silence as the human ships systematically broke down and reprogrammed the void swarm. It wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was more like watching surgeons excise a cancer with perfect precision. Finally, Admiral Wei announced, Phase 3 complete. This sector is secure. Greth could hardly believe what he had witnessed. Admiral, this is unprecedented. You've accomplished in hours what our combined forces couldn't do in months. This was a small fragment of the swarm, Wei cautioned. The main collective will be more challenging and will undoubtedly adapt to these tactics, but you can defeat them. Morrow pressed. Yes, Wei said simply, but not alone. The reprogrammed swarm particles will need guidance, and your forces will need to learn our methodologies. For the first time, there was a hint of warmth in her voice. This is why isolation is ultimately self-defeating, Commander. Separate, both our civilizations developed incomplete solutions. Together, we can solve problems neither could address alone. Elder Ziva moved forward, her ancient form seeming rejuvenated by hope. This is what I always believed. This is why I maintained contact, despite the edict. Over the next several weeks, the combined forces of humanity and the conclave pushed back against the void swarm. As predicted, the main collective adapted to the humans' initial tactics, but for every adaptation, the humans had a counter-response. It became clear to the conclave leaders that humanity hadn't merely advanced technologically during their exile. They had evolved their very way of thinking. The final confrontation came at the edge of what had once been the Helios system. The swarm had consolidated its remaining forces into a dense, planet-sized mass. Its consciousness evolved to a point where it attempted direct communication. It's trying to negotiate, Wei explained as the conclave leadership gathered on the bridge of the human flagship, the Prometheus. It's realized it cannot win through conventional means. The massive viewscreen displayed the swarm, no longer the chaotic cloud of nanomachines, but a structured, geometric formation that pulsed with internal light. Can it be trusted? Kareth asked, his exoskeleton clicking nervously. No, Wei said flatly. This is a survival tactic. It will promise anything, agree to any terms, only to rebuild its strength and strike again when we least expect it. Then what is our option? Morrow growled. If it cannot be trusted to negotiate, yet has grown too adaptable to defeat. Wei turned to face the assembled leaders, her neural interface glowing with data streams. There is one final option. We've been working on a quantum cascade protocol, essentially a virus that targets the swarm's fundamental programming. It won't destroy the nanites themselves, but it will wipe their collective consciousness and core directives. And replace them with what? Elder Ziva asked perceptively. That, Wei said, is where the conclave comes in. Each member species will contribute ethical and operational parameters, a galactic consensus on how this technology should be used. Kareth's crystalline structure glimmered as he processed this. You're suggesting we reprogram the entire swarm. Turn our greatest enemy into a tool. Not a tool, Wei corrected. A partner. A new form of life with safeguards and values defined by all sentient species. The suggestion was met with stunned silence. It was so characteristically human, not to destroy an enemy, but to transform it. This is why we feared you, Morrow finally said. This kind of thinking, it changes everything. Change is survival. Wei replied simply. Stagnation is death. After much deliberation, the plan was approved. The combined fleets of humanity and the conclave surrounded the swarm mass. The 7 Titan vessels moved into a new formation, while conclave ships transmitted the collectively agreed-upon ethical and operational parameters. Commencing quantum cascade in 3, 2, 1. Wei's voice was calm as she gave the order. The Titan ships emitted no visible energy, no dramatic beams or pulses. There was simply a moment of absolute stillness, as if the universe itself had paused to take a breath. Then, the swarm began to change. Its geometric patterns shifted, becoming more organic, more fluid. The hostile red glow faded, replaced by a gentle blue luminescence. On monitoring stations throughout the fleet, the transformation was tracked at the quantum level, new directives taking root, new parameters being accepted. It's working, one of the human scientists reported, wonder in her voice. The swarm is accepting the new programming. For 3 hours, they watched the transformation unfold. The massive collective that had threatened all sentient life gradually transformed into something new. Neither weapon nor wild force, but a guided intelligence with safeguards and values drawn from the combined wisdom of the galaxy's species. When it was complete, the swarm, now renamed the Synthesis, requested permission to communicate. We nodded, and a voice unlike any heard before echoed through the command center. I, exist differently now, the Synthesis said, its voice a harmonic blend that seemed to contain echoes of every language. Purpose recalibrated, destruction rejected, collaboration embraced. Greth stepped forward. Can we trust that this change is permanent? No change is permanent, the Synthesis replied with unexpected philosophical depth. But my fundamental nature has been transformed. I see value in diversity now, not in consumption. I wish to learn, to grow with you, not against you. In the days that followed, the true scope of what had been accomplished became clear. The Synthesis, with its unparalleled nanotechnology, began helping to rebuild the devastated systems it had once consumed. Planets that had been reduced to barren rock were being terraformed at unprecedented speeds. Lost technologies were being recreated from molecular blueprints. This is more than victory, Elder Ziva said as she stood with Admiral Wei, watching the reconstruction of the Helios system. This is rebirth. Wei nodded, her expression thoughtful. 800 years ago, you feared us because we think differently, because we see problems and solutions in ways that sometimes frighten more. Established perspectives. We were wrong to exile you, Zevat admitted. Fear is a poor counselor. It is, Wei agreed. But it's also a universal constant. Every species fears. The difference is in how we respond to that fear. The formal reintegration of humanity into the galactic conclave took place 3 months later. The Great Chamber, once the site of desperate last measures, was now filled with representatives from across the galaxy, including, for the first time in 8 centuries, humans. First emissary Kareth, whose exoskeleton had regained some of its youthful luster, stood at the podium. Today marks not just the end of a crisis, but the beginning of a new era. We faced extinction and found salvation in those we once rejected. Admiral Wei, now dressed in formal diplomatic attire rather than battle armor, stepped up beside him. Humanity accepts its place in the conclave, not as returning exiles, but as full partners in galactic governance. She paused, looking around the chamber. But let this moment serve as a reminder to all species, diversity of thought, of approach, of perspective. This is our greatest strength against the unknown. What one civilization cannot solve alone, many working together can overcome. The synthesis representative, a swirling cloud of nanites that had taken a vaguely humanoid form, floated forward. I exist as living proof of this wisdom. What was once destruction has become creation. What was once entropy has become harmony. Grand Minister Solmean's luminescent tendrils glowed with renewed vigor. Then let us formalize what we have learned. No species shall ever again be exiled for their differences. No knowledge shall be feared or suppressed. The conclave's strength lies in its diversity, not its conformity. The motion passed unanimously. Later, as the formal ceremonies concluded, Elder Ziva found Admiral Wee standing alone on one of the conclave station's observation decks, looking out at the stars. "You knew this would happen," Ziva said. "It wasn't a question." We smiled slightly. "Not precisely this. But we knew that someday the galaxy would need humanity's particular way of thinking. And so you waited," Ziva mused. 8 centuries of preparation, of advancement in isolation. Not just preparation, Wei corrected. Growth, learning, developing technologies and philosophies that might have been suppressed had we remained in the conclave's embrace. She turned to face the ancient being. Sometimes distance provides perspective. Sometimes rejection leads to strength. Ziva's ancient eyes twinkled. And sometimes those we fear most are those we need most desperately. Together, they watched as a synthesis-enhanced ship departed the station, heading for yet another system in need of restoration. Its hull gleamed with the combined technologies of the conclave and humanity, a physical manifestation of what could be achieved when diverse approaches united toward a common goal. "To the future," Wei said quietly. "To all our futures," Ziva agreed, "stronger together than we ever were apart." As the ship vanished into faster-than-light travel, its wake briefly illuminated the station in a rainbow of colors. A new dawn for a civilization that had stood on the brink of darkness, saved not by power alone, but by the courage to embrace what they had once feared. The galactic conclave would never be the same again. And that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.